Hey everybody, it's Rockula, and welcome back to Rockula Retrospective. This is day 16 of my VEDA series, 30 Bands in 30 Days. VEDA stands for Vlog Every Day in April, and today's band is Kiss. I hate to start a vlog with, back in my day, but it is necessary in this case. I know that young people get told all the time, we didn't have any internet and MTV hadn't been invented yet, but I need to give you a sense of perspective. Kiss was not the cultural institution back in the 70s that they are today. In fact, many people made fun of you for listening to them. Keep in mind that my musical experience was relegated to what my parents played on the radio in the car and what I saw on TV. My friends and I would scour every week's TV guide to see if Kiss was going to be on. Then one day I saw a TV ad for the Paul Lynde Halloween special and they were going to have Kiss as a guest. I just about peed myself, and the next day my school was abuzz with the news. Up until that point, my record collection was children's music. My first rock record was K-Tel's Hit Machine. The standout tracks are Shake Your Booty by Casey and the Sunshine Band and Disco Duck. Even my favorite yacht rock song, Moonlight Feels Right, is on this album. I suspect this is where my fondness for mallet percussion comes from. But the most important track on this collection is Rock and Roll All Night by Kiss. It was way more aggressive than any song on the album. Rick Springfield's Take a Hand was pretty rockin', but nothing compared to Kiss. Not only was the music powerful, but it was simple enough for 7-year-old Rockula to understand. I hadn't even seen a picture of them yet. When I did see what Kiss looked like, I couldn't understand what I was looking at. I couldn't figure out if they were men or women because their faces were painted and they had long hair. They remained a mystery until Friday, October 26th, 1976, when I witnessed Kiss for the first time in my life. You know, in every documentary where some giant rock star marks the Beatles on Ed Sullivan as their starting point? Well, this is my starting point. The last time I checked, the entire show is on YouTube. If you watch it, it's pretty awful. It's typical of the empty cultural vacuum that existed on TV in the 70s. But then Kiss came on and did Detroit Rock City. I was just as flabbergasted as Paul Lynde at what I saw. They didn't even look human to me. They were like some kind of unearthly beings or superheroes. Unfortunately, we didn't have $1,000 for a VCR, so that was all the Kiss I got to see on TV for a while. I told my mom that I wanted to spend my allowance on a record, so we went to Sears and I bought my first real rock record. It was Kiss Destroyer, and things would never be the same again. First of all, I'd like to thank my parents for allowing their 8-year-old child to buy this album. It must have been quite an interesting time when they looked it over. My parents didn't sit down and listen to it with me, but I played it loud enough for them to hear it through the door. They just knew it was pre-adolescent rebellion, but you gotta give them credit for being so progressive-minded. Regardless of your opinion of Kiss as artists, my first rock album was one of the greatest of all time. Before we get to the music, there's no denying this album cover. The destroyed buildings in the background look just like the ones on the Godzilla model that I had. My 8-year-old brain now equated Kiss with Godzilla, and Gene might be related to him by the looks of those boots. I can't spend a lot of time on each album, but Destroyer was important because it was much larger sounding than the previous albums that I had not even heard yet. Not only that, but the songs were written in collaboration with producer Bob Ezrin, who also helped invent Alice Cooper. The songs were better written and more anthemic. Plus, it was a concept album. Not so much that the songs were all about one central topic, but that they are trying to conceptualize Kiss as something larger than just a band that wears makeup and blows shit up. This is where they really start to invent the Kiss mythos. It is the dividing line between Kiss as a band and Kiss as a group of 4 distinct characters. As usual, the first member to step up to the plate and take a stab at creating their own individual character is Gene with God of Thunder. Paul defined himself more by being the principal singer and storyteller of these entries into the book of rock and roll fairy tales. He sings of rebellion and the constrictive environment of living at home with your folks. He's telling you to come out into the scary but vibrant night with its fatal car accidents and glorious moments of freedom and excess. But don't even get me started on Beth. I hated that song so much that it drove me to do my first sound experiments. I started by switching the speed from 33 to 45 so it sounded like the Chipmunks, and then I started moving the album backwards with my finger to see if it sounded any better in reverse. There was a lot of scratches and wear on that particular part of the album. Eventually, Ace would become my favorite member of the band and put out the best solo album, but I'm getting ahead of myself. That was in October 1976, and Christmas was just around the corner, so what do I find under the tree? Kiss Alive! I honestly wonder sometimes if I had listened to Alive before Destroyer, I may not have been able to appreciate it as much. Not because it was so powerful. Destroyer was powerful, but Alive was so raw-sounding. It sounded like you were in the audience at a Kiss show with the bombs and all the spectacle that the pictures on the album portrayed. To an 8-year-old boy listening to this music and looking at those pictures, it was both exciting and scary at the same time. It was also an introduction to the first 3 albums, which I eventually collected as well. It is a fair criticism of these albums to say that they failed to capture the energy of Kiss's live shows, and I prefer to listen to Alive, but honorable mention goes to Hotter Than Hell because it lacked the sterility of the first 2 albums and was a lot warmer and organic. Plus, on the cover, we see the first real example of Kiss becoming individual characters. It also has my favorite Kiss song of all time, which is Goin' Blind. Next Christmas, I got Kiss Alive too. It was more of the same energy like Alive, but more amped up, and I was ready for it this time. I'd seen the album in the racks at Kmart and had handled it so much that I knew what it was before I opened it. I had memorized the weight and even remembered that it bulged a little bit in the middle because of all the booklets, temporary tattoos, and merchandise order forms that they included inside. When you open up the album, the center photo is of the coolest stage setup of all time, with pyro in full effect. It sparked my imagination and I started drawing. My notebooks were covered with drawings of Kiss's makeup. I tried to build models of the stage out of paper and cardboard. I began obsessively drawing Paul Stanley's Flying V. This began my appreciation of the electric guitar in all of its shapes and forms, but the Flying V has to be the coolest electric guitar of all time. Remember how I said it was rare to see Kiss on TV? Well, our wishes were granted in 1978 with Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park. Even 9-year-old Rockula could tell this movie sucked, but I was so engrossed with Kiss at this point it didn't matter. I was just happy to see Kiss on TV at all. Then came Christmas 1978 when I got all 4 of the solo albums. Like I said, my parents were super cool. Everybody rates the solo albums pretty much the same way I do, with Ace being number 1. Gene comes in second, but I think he should get extra credit for taking the most risks. Plus, he wrote some of the creepiest sounding ballads ever. Paul's album sounds most like Kiss, which sheds light into who contributed most to the Kiss sound. I think I listened to Peter's album a couple of times and never listened to it again. Next would come a dark day in my early years of believing in the rock and roll fairy tale. Kiss went disco. I didn't know how to feel about it. The moment I started liking Kiss was the moment I started getting shit for liking Kiss. I stood strong for rock and roll and believed Kiss would fight to the death and destroy disco like they did on their album covers. 10-year-old Rockula felt kind of betrayed, but not enough to give up on the band completely. October 23rd, 1979. This is an incredibly important date because it was my very first concert. Kiss at the Tarrant County Convention Center in Fort Worth. Once again, my cool-ass father took me to see a band that most people would not take their 11-year-old kid to see. Seeing very young children at Kiss concerts is commonplace today, but in 1979, I was one of those kids that the real Kiss fans resented because I was turning Kiss into a kiddie band. At least I got cred from the guy who was standing next to me in the upper balcony. He was probably pissed that he couldn't smoke weed because some kid and his dad were next to him, but he gave me props for knowing every song. He also commented that my dad must be one very cool dude. Not only did I manage to see my first concert before the end of the 70s, but I also got to see Kiss with their original lineup. But the winds of change were looming over the horizon, and little kids like me would end up ruining the band we loved so much. Their material suffered from trying to please their newly diverse fan base, and they lost their edge. I bought Unmasked but barely played it. I did notice that Peter Criss had gotten a lot better on the drums, but then later found out he wasn't even on the album. It was legendary studio drummer Anton Fig. This brings my first period of Kiss fandom to a close, but I want to use the previous comment as a segue to my next part of this review, and that is the impact that Kiss had on me as an artist. I noticed that the drums on Unmasked were better because I was paying more attention to the drums than any other instrument. Then I got my first real drum set for Christmas, and I drew on all the things that I had learned from listening to Kiss. I kind of rag on Peter Criss because he wasn't as good as his replacement, Eric Carr, and he had the lamest solo album, but his drum parts are the foundation of my very first attempts at playing the drums. Kiss Alive was my first play-along album, where I would put on headphones and try to play along with the drums. The drums were just difficult enough for me to push myself in my early years, but simple enough to play. Even if you screwed up in a million spots, it was okay because it was Kiss. I think I might have been too intimidated by the drums if I had discovered Rush before Kiss. Speaking of keeping it simple, I would later notice how easy their rhythm guitar parts were, and realize they were built around Paul's need to prance around and play uncomplicated chords. I had learned how to play all of the Ramones songs on guitar, and noticed that Kiss could be played with the same two-finger chords. Not only that, but there were a lot of open chords at the top of the neck, which were designed to ring out and take up space, while Ace did his thing and Paul jumped around. I use a lot of those open chords in my own music. One more thing on a really personal note, I'd like to show you the guitar that I love most in this world. It is designed mostly around the single pickup flying V that Paul played around 78. His V had a mirrored pickguard and was slowly covered in rhinestones as the tour progressed. I went with a glitter finish and installed a single coil in the neck just because I wanted something there, but it's very close to Paul Stanley's guitar in my mind. Kiss affected me for good and for bad. I gained an appreciation for aesthetics and putting on a visually stimulating show. Their marketing and artwork are the blueprint for every image-oriented hard rock band that followed them. There are two bands looming over the horizon that would split my taste right down the middle and make me put my Kiss records away for a while. I was introduced to both Rush and the Ramones right about the same time, and my focus would divide into two very different aesthetic directions. I would dig out my Kiss albums in the 90s as my grunge pals started to acknowledge them, and I even attended the reunion shows in the late 90s. I'm sure you have a completely different story to tell about Kiss, and I'd love to hear it down in the comments below. I'd also appreciate it if you shared, liked, and subscribed. Thanks for checking out my VEDA series, 30 Bands in 30 Days. Day 17 will be another heavy hitter, as I will be featuring Kraftwerk. I'm Rockula, and this is Rockula Retrospective.